Nintendo absolutely sucks. I would think of a more witty or engaging way to start the video than that, but I simply don't want to, because Nintendo absolutely sucks. So, a few things involving Nintendo happened late last week. The big one being the mass takedown of Nintendo-related things in Garry's mod. Legit, a decade plus worth of stuff just erased due to a legal notice, because that's really what you want to be doing right now, Nintendo. That's the best way to keep people liking you, is getting rid of a decade plus of art assets and Gmod assets, just because people weren't having fun with Nintendo IP in the exact way that you wanted them to. That's awesome. This truly does not affect them at all, and it only increases their brand awareness, and they didn't care about these things for a decade plus, but now all the Nintendo assets in Gmod have to go, because how dare you have fun with a Nintendo IP without paying for a Switch first, I guess. And in case you're one of the people who's like, oh, it's all fake, all the takedowns were actually fake, someone was impersonating Nintendo, it's not legit, sorry. Garry himself confirmed that this is all legit. Like, the Garry in Garry's mod confirmed this. He's made multiple statements about it. So either it's all 100% legit and Nintendo directly did this, or it's someone legally posing as Nintendo or trying to represent Nintendo, and Nintendo themselves isn't doing jack to stop it, meaning it's all 100% legit and on Nintendo in that scenario too. Like, to all the people trying to say that this is actually someone impersonating Nintendo, you realize Nintendo is still at fault because there's someone legally posing as them and taking legal action against another corporation in the gaming industry, and Nintendo is doing nothing to stop it. At that point, it may as well be Nintendo themselves. And also, in case you're going to argue with that, Garry himself addressed this in a tweet. He said, quote, "I've got some legal questions for the it's fake guys. There are a lot of walls of text and 900-page Steam forum threads that I'm not going to read through. Please help me understand. 1. If the one big tell that these are fake is the email domain being mmnintendo.com, why do they use the wrong domain? Wouldn't they have more luck if they just used a fake nintendo.com email? 2. If they have a different domain, does that mean they're not working on behalf of Nintendo? 3. Has anyone gotten confirmation that it's fake from Nintendo at any point in the last 10 years? 4. Have we gotten any confirmed real Nintendo DMCA takedowns that are different? And 5. If they don't work for Nintendo, why have they been doing this shit for 10 years? How is it still a fun troll for 10 years? Like, I hate to break it to you, if Nintendo isn't directly behind these takedowns on Gmod, then the person who is behind them is absolutely doing so on Nintendo's behalf or with Nintendo's permission. There is no reason for Nintendo to be completely silent about someone legally impersonating them on a large scale unless they are in cahoots with the person. But also, the Gmod stuff kind of masked something else that happened with Nintendo last week, and since everyone has already made videos about the Gmod situation, I figured we'd talk about the admittedly smaller hole that Nintendo stepped in, because I think it's still worth discussing, and for some reason, the Nintendo faithful seemed a lot more willing to loudly defend this one, despite the fact that their defenses were really stupid, and it seemed that the internet kind of swept this under the rug because of the Garry's mod stuff. So, remember Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door? That was a good game, right? And there's a remake coming out pretty soon on the Switch. That's pretty cool, right? But the other day, it was seemingly confirmed that Paper Mario on the Switch will be running at 30 frames per second, while the original GameCube version ran at a full 60. The frame rate of this 20-year-old game has been sliced in half, and they're charging you $60 for it because, checks notes, the graphics are better. Yes, the mind-blowing graphics of the Paper Mario remake. When I talk about laziness in AAA gaming, this is exactly what I'm talking about. There is zero reason for this, other than the fact that Nintendo knows they can get away with it. And if you don't think this is such a big deal, or for the experience, or for the consumer, just stick around, because we're going to be responding to a lot of Nintendo defenders in this video, and I'm going to go into very deep detail as to why 30 FPS on the Paper Mario remake is a slap in the face to anyone who buys it. And maybe I'm just extra fired up about this because of the Garry's mod thing, but I don't care, because like I said, for some reason the Paper Mario frame rate thing summoned all of the Nintendo defenders across Twitter. I guess it was easier to defend this than the Gmod thing, so this is where all their energy was directed, and a lot of people just scrolled right by it because of the Gmod thing. So come along with me, because we're going to respond to a bunch of people who are perfectly happy to defend a corporation selling them a 20-year-old game for $60 while slicing the frame rate in half and refusing to preserve basically anything from the console that the original game was released on. For no reason. Nintendo dudes are something else. Bring Back Banjo quote tweets the news and says 99% of gamers would not be able to tell the difference between 60 and 30 frames per second, and he got almost 1,000 likes on this, which is the part that breaks my brain the most. If you cannot tell the difference between 30 frames and 60 frames, or 30 hertz and 60 hertz, like, everyone can notice that. I don't understand why we're still making this argument. You ever notice how you go into like a Costco or a Best Buy, and if you're only used to watching movies at 24 frames or whatever, however many fucking frames a movie is, and then you walk into a Best Buy or a Costco or something, and you see that same movie that you've watched previously, but it's playing on one of like the 60 hertz like fancy upscaled refresh monitors, or refresh TVs, whatever they want to fucking call them. I think they look terrible. But like, everyone can notice the difference. If you watch a movie at 24 frames and then go see that movie being sped up to 60 hertz on one of those stupid monitors, everyone will say when they walk by the TV, huh, that looks different. Because it's easy to notice. And also playing a game, oh my god, playing a game at 30 frames, then playing a game at 60 frames, I don't care if you're not used to it. It's so noticeable. The same game at 60 frames is always going to feel better than that same game at 30 frames, because you are literally getting a quicker response time through the monitor because there are more frames. There is less time between your inputs and the action. There's less downtime and less jumps in the animations because there are literally more frames per second. The fact that you think 99% of gamers wouldn't be able to tell the difference here, and that almost 1,000 people agree with you. Do you see why I felt the need to talk about this? Do you see why I kind of wanted to bring this up even though most people swept it under the rug because of the Garry's Mod thing? This is ridiculous. But let's keep going. I have a lot of screenshots today. It's gonna get depressing. Scott says, if Paper Mario fans turn this game away despite all of its clear improvements and it fails, and as a result we return to New Paper Mario as the new standard format for the series, I have absolutely zero sympathy. You fuckers will get exactly what you deserve. So, just to be clear, you're advocating we buy a product we don't want because if we don't buy it, Nintendo might make another product we don't want. My boy, if you buy the product you don't want, that will guarantee that you get another product you don't want. If you run out and buy a game that runs like ass, Nintendo will keep making games that run like ass. If you encourage Nintendo stomping all over their own legacy for no reason other than they just can't be fucked to properly preserve it, what incentive do they have to preserve it in the future? I understand the point about how people want classic Paper Mario, so you gotta go out and buy the classic Paper Mario, but that argument just does not apply to the criticism at hand. And I know we're talking about Nintendo here, so basically nothing we ever do will stop them and snap them out of the DMCA-obsessed trance that they constantly live in, but reading this tweet, it really sounds like you're just cool with Nintendo effectively holding their legacy hostage when you could just, play their old games on an emulator. That's why this argument is so stupid. They're charging full price 20 years after the original game's launch for a worse experience than the original game, and instead of just being like, nah, fuck that, I'll play the original game, you guys are like, guys, no, we have to buy this or else Nintendo won't maybe possibly give us another good Paper Mario game eventually, maybe. We have to keep giving Nintendo money. It's the only way. @LoveBread says the people who care are the same people that want graphics to be as realistic as possible. The same people who care about 30 frames per second on a 20-year-old game are the same people who want realistic graphics. And you're referring to a Paper Mario game? Buddy, no. That's just, no. No. Why? No. The people who care about 60 frames in a Paper Mario game, especially a 20-year-old one, are the people who care about the gameplay experience. If you're coming to Paper Mario for the most realistic graphics possible, you're just doing it wrong. You're doing gaming wrong. Like, what is this argument? Koji-chan says, this game is automatically bad then because it doesn't give me 4K 60 FPS. quote, Paper Mario Thousand Year Door fans after they gassed this up a little too much. Right. Right. No, expecting the same frame rate as a 20-year-old game with a paper cutout art style, which cannot possibly be actually that hard to get up and running, even on the Switch, because again, the original game was 60 frames 20 years ago, and this is the third Nintendo console since the GameCube. Apparently, if you expected 60 frames in the remake, that's because you were expecting 4K 60 plus on a Switch game, by the way. This is your actual argument. You think people just gassed the remake up too much and also were expecting 4K 60 plus, all because they're upset that the remake of a 20-year-old game from 3 console generations ago is running at precisely half the frames as the old game. This is actually the hill you're dying on. And you people wonder why Nintendo does not ever get better. Like, at all. Like, oh my goodness. Y'all acting like this isn't a heavily graphically updated remake. Lots of things that were flat textures are now 3D models. Again, I don't care how heavily graphically updated the remake is. It's still a Paper Mario game, and it's still running at half the frames of the 20-year-old version. And it's all in a game where precise timing of your actions is kind of important, and that's inherently going to be hurt by a halved frame rate. How is this hard? Like, how do you not get this? Right Guy says, bro, these replies make me feel so unclean. It's one thing to like not enjoy the change to 30 FPS. It's another thing to actively push for people to skip the remake because of it. You people realize we may not get another chance at this genre for Paper Mario, right? It's like you guys acknowledge that Nintendo is doing something bad. You acknowledge that this is disappointing, but then you still say that, oh, we gotta support it, because if we don't support it, we might not get another Paper Mario. Does that sound like a healthy consumer product relationship to you? Because that sounds like the opposite of how the open market works to me, but that's what happens when Nintendo just conditions you for 20 years. You will literally buy anything that they hand you if they put the right logo on the box, and then you wonder why they don't preserve their old games, and you wonder why they do DMCA takedowns on anyone who doesn't buy the thing with the right logo on it. It's like you created this. You don't get to dismiss criticism of Nintendo now because you're the one that made them like this. Hello, I'm interrupting this video to remind you that this channel is sponsored by 4D Gaming. If you would like a really nice mousepad, go to 4dgaming.com and use code Joe for a discount. This channel is also sponsored by Glitch Energy. It's basically G Fuel, but better, so go to Glitch Energy and use code Joe for a discount. Thank you for letting me interrupt your content. I'll let you keep watching it now. Potato Muffin says, this game's entire battle system revolves around meticulously timing button inputs. This FPS cap makes the gameplay objectively worse to play. This is a reasonable complaint. Did any of you actually play the game? Thank you. Some of you get this. Some of you understand why this is inherently a gameplay problem. Like, slicing the frame rate in half should be enough to be a criticism on its own, but in a game that relies on precise timing, this should be a huge red flag to all of you. This makes the game objectively worse. Lower frame rates always make gameplay worse because they literally reduce the responsiveness of the game itself, because you are literally getting less frames on the screen, meaning there is literally more time between you pushing the button and the action being shown on screen. That's why higher frame rates inherently feel smoother and more responsive. You are literally waiting less time between the press of your button and the action being on screen. So in a game that relies on precise timing, like Thousand Year Door, slicing the frame rate in half of the original is actually huge. That's a huge problem. I'm reminded of all the people who say Bloodborne is like 10 times easier when played on an emulator, because an emulator gets you above 30 frames and just makes the game more responsive. I'm absolutely convinced that those of you saying that this is fine and that people are just complaining too much, I'm absolutely convinced that none of you played the original game, because otherwise you would understand this right away. Gladak says, you cannot be serious right now, not when this literally exists. Again, thank you. It's a relief to see some of you people actually getting this for once. More of this, please. More of publicly dragging Nintendo for dipping their beans in your milkshakes. Yes, that was a New Girl reference. I will not apologize. Also, in before, Metroid Prime Remastered was a remaster and Paper Mario is the remake. Yeah, and Paper Mario also looks like this. Like, Like, it's not like Nintendo is incapable of making 60 FPS games anymore. They chose not to make this one 60 FPS because they knew you would buy it anyways. Nick says, okay, everyone shut up now, y'all sound like this, and then a gif of a crying duck. Just consume product. Just shut up and consume the product. They refused to preserve one of the most beloved games in their library for 20 years, and then when they finally re-release it, it is an objectively worse experience because the frame rate has been sliced in half for no real technical reason that I can discern. But everyone sounds like this because they don't want to spend $60 on it now. You guys have no idea how corporate knob gobbly you sound when you say stuff like this. Like, you guys really think you're dunking on the hate, like you're dunking on the haters, like these people are just crying about everything. But it's like, if you think about it for 5 seconds, I can't even hear what you're saying anymore because the boot is too far down your throat. Crystal Stick says, for people that only care about FPS and single player games for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Then a picture of the world's smallest violin from SpongeBob. That's right, apparently you're not allowed to care about high frame rates in a single player game. Apparently high frame rates only impact your gameplay experience in not single player games, I guess is the point you're making, which is a really stupid point. Like, I just, how do you, what? Adrian says, doesn't mean a thing, lol, it's just more mindless material for Sony and Microsoft fans. So, basically, Nintendo's allowed to do whatever they want because if you criticize them, you're just a Sony or Microsoft fan. That's really stupid. At Mario Man 85 says, just one of the many things people will not shut up about with this remake. I've never personally understood the whole frame rate argument because it seems like such a small thing to get mad about. How badly could it affect gameplay if they lowered the frame rate by 30 frames? If you can't tell the gameplay difference between 30 frames and 60 frames, that's not anyone's fault except yours. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, I don't care if you've only ever played 30 FPS games in your whole life, you're completely ignorant to this subject by no fault of your own. Okay, boot up literally basically any indie game on your PC. You can do it on a MacBook, you can do it on a shitty Chromebook. Boot up a very easily running indie game on your computer, and that will let you switch between 30 and 60 frames so you can get a proper understanding of how this is. And then come delete this tweet or print it out, mail it to me with a scratch and sniff sticker. It has to be orange scented. That's the only way I'm going to forgive you. And in that envelope, I want you to also attach a picture of a whale. Okay, Chris Lopez says, do you people think this game is a port, Lamau? No, we think it's a remake of a 20-year-old game that ran at certain performance standards. Don't you think that after 20 years of progress, a remake should be able to, at the very least, match the performance of the original game? Do you think that is an unreasonable request? I'm already Scree says it being 30 FPS for 60 FPS changes nothing. Who cares? And I found the person who started gaming like 3 years ago because I can't think of any other reason for this. I'm just getting tired. I can't do this anymore. Okay, one more. Origami King played perfectly at 30 FPS. I don't think it will change much here. In my opinion, in a game of this type, it's not that important. A game that requires precise timing does not benefit from 60 frames. It's not important to have 60 frames. And my evidence for that is that the newer Paper Mario games that everyone criticizes for being poopy stinky, that one played perfectly at 30, which means Thousand Year Door at 30 is also fine. All context doesn't matter. I hate this. I'm done. I can't do this anymore, Toodles.